everyone, welcome back to Quarantine Cooking. I'm Jennifer King, and today I'm really excited to have a guest chef in the kitchen with me. My lovely and beautiful daughter Sophia is here to help. And today we are going to make a recipe that's really close to our hearts. It's my granny's famous apple pie recipe. And you know, let's face it, during these times of uncertainty, it's nice to have something warm and comforting at the end of dinner. I know desserts are really huge right now in my household, and so we are excited to make another apple pie. We're gonna get started making my granny's famous apple pie now, and the first part of making any pie is usually the crust. So apple pie is a double crust dough recipe, and I want to share ours with you, and then you can, obviously if you have a family pie dough recipe that you like, you can use that. But this is the one I really love. It really produces a flaky, delicious crust, which I think is paramount in kind of pie making. So the first thing we have is 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour. And Sophia is gonna help me. She's gonna go ahead and pour that in. Go ahead, sweetheart. We're putting all of this in a food processor. And if you don't have a food processor to do this work for you, just kind of, scoop it in with your hand there, just kind of use your hand, sweetie, like this, look. Just kind of, so they all goes in, you see? I know this is kind of tricky, the flour, right? And it can be. There is a trick to this actually in the kitchen, in the culinary kitchen. Did I spill some? I saw you look that way. I hope not, but you want to try and get 2.5 cups of flour in your food processor without spilling it. Of course, you could put it right in the food processor. We just mise en place our ingredients out today. Mise en place in French means everything in its place. Now, when you're baking, it is a science. With baking, it's not like cooking where you can just kind of throw and hope that different ingredients in and just not measure and kind of be more creative. Baking, you really do need to take the time to measure. And when you're scooping flour out of your big kind of container that you keep your flour in, you really want to make sure that when you use your scooper in there, that you level it off to whatever it's supposed to be. You don't want it heaping. You really do want to level off to get an accurate measurement, okay? So we have our 2.5 cups flour. Now Sophie's gonna add in a half tablespoon of sugar, just granulated regular sugar. So go ahead and put that in there. That's gonna give the dough some sweetness, okay? Sophie's got plenty of sweetness. And then we're gonna add just some salt. So you can use kosher salt, that's what I have. And this is a half teaspoon of kosher salt. So go ahead and add that in. As we all know, salt equals flavor. So you gotta add salt to kick up the flavor. And Sophie's gonna grab out of the freezer, I diced up, go ahead Soph, go grab the butter. I diced up some nice Kerrygold butter. If you have unsalted butter, that's usually the butter most chefs like to use, then you control the salt. But if you don't, you just have salted, that's okay too. So what you want to do, thank you Sophie, is you want to dice up your butter. This is 2 sticks of butter or a half pound of butter. And I kept it in the freezer because we really want to try and keep the pie crust as cold as possible. So come on up, Soph, and I'm gonna have you put in the diced butter. So go ahead and add that in. You have to kind of use your hands because I think it's kind of like ice cubes, huh? Go ahead, put that in there. And this is a great recipe. I remember making this pie with my grandmother when I was about Sophia's age. She would have me get up on a stool like Sophia and help her peel and dice the apples and then get to pour the cinnamon over it. So I always loved cooking and watching my grandmother bake in the kitchen. And so I think it's important, and we're all home right now, and this is something definitely your kids could help you with. Okay, so we have all our ingredients. We have our flour, our diced butter, our salt, and our sugar. So now it's time to have fun. Ready to dice and pulse this together? Put the lid on right. Sometimes this is the hardest part with food processors, figuring out how to get it to start. I did say earlier that if you don't have a food processor, you can always just do this in a bowl, and you can use a pastry cutter to kind of cut in all the ingredients to each other. It's just easier and more convenient to use a food processor if you have one. So we're gonna go ahead and pulse this. There's a pulse and an on button. We're gonna pulse this until the butter gets about the size of a pea. Once it's about the size of a pea, then we stop and we take it out. Or I'm sorry, we stop and we're gonna add some water. We need to add liquid to make it come together. So I'm gonna go ahead and pulse this. Okay, so we're letting the butter pulse until it gets about the size of a pea. And if because your butter is so cold, if it gets stuck and it's not moving initially, you can always turn it off and use your spatula or a spoon, and kind of move it around just so that you want the butter to get in there and make sure it gets pulsed. Mine is kind of, I might have put it in the freezer too long, but we want it, see it's big chunks of butter still right now? Still a big chunk. We want it to be the size of peas. So we're gonna let it go a little bit longer here. And you wanna hear it get in there and really, you might have to shake your food processor a little just to kind of get that butter in there. Mine's a little food processor. If you have a bigger food processor, this probably won't be so much of an issue, but mine's a little guy, so he does the job, but you know, it's a lot for a 2 pie crust dough here. Okay, now it's moving, which is awesome. So I'm gonna check it in just a minute. And what size do we want the dough, the pieces of butter? The size of a pea, right? Yep, okay. So let's see, do you know what the size of a pea is? Let's see. Okay, so now you can see that it's broken apart and I can feel the little bits of butter. And you can see there, it's just like, I see butter in here and it's just about the size of a pea. So that's what we want. Once your butter is incorporated and it's broken down like that, now it's time when we can add our liquid, and our liquid is water. Okay, so our dough, the butter in the dough is now about the size of a pea. So now we are ready to add our liquid, which is ice water. And because we're trying, go ahead and grab the ice water soap out of the fridge. Because the ice water, you want it to be cold, you want to keep this dough cold, you're gonna just keep it in the refrigerator, maybe with some ice cubes until you're ready to use it. It's about 6 to 7 tablespoons of water. Thank you, my dear. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna turn the food processor on low, or just turn it on, and then you're gonna slowly drizzle in the water until the dough starts to pull away from the walls of the food processor, and you'll see it start to form like a dough. You don't want to add too much water because it'll make it mushy. You really want to, and you don't want to add too little because then it'll be too dry a dough and it won't come together. So it is kind of a fine line, and that's why we say 6 to 7 tablespoons, because you're not really sure how much you're going to need. So you kind of have to eyeball this. This is kind of tricky. But what I do is as soon as I see it pull away from the side, that's when I stop the food processor, and then I'm ready to kind of finish it off on my kitchen countertop. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this on and slowly start adding in the water. And you'll see it kind of speed up too because it's starting to pull together. So you can hear it change the food processor sound too. You hear that? See how it came together into the ball? Now we know we're pretty much done. So I'm going to turn it off. So we are going to now take out the dough, and first we're going to put some flour down so that the dough doesn't stick to our countertop. And just kind of spread it around. And then you have to be careful. Yeah, I know, Mommy makes a mess when I bake. That's okay. We can sweep later. So we're gonna go ahead and pull the dough out. Be careful of the sharp blade with these guys. I'm on every little morsel of dough. Now this is the point too where if your dough is a little wet, you can always sprinkle in a little more flour. At this point, I wouldn't do that in the food processor because you really can't gauge it, but I can feel my dough and it's almost perfect. I feel like it could use a little bit more flour, but I'm just gonna knead it. You notice I'm kneading the dough just a little bit just to kind of bring it together. And also to incorporate some of the flour that I put on the surface, the countertop. But it does feel a little wet, so I'm just gonna sprinkle just the littlest amount of flour, and then I'm just gonna knead it. Now when you knead your dough, whether you're doing a bread or you're doing a pie crust, you don't wanna do too much of pie crust because you can make it tough. So I'm just doing this just to get it to where I want the dough to be. But you take your ball of dough and then you fold it over on itself about halfway, and then with your palm of your hand, you push away from yourself. So fold, push, and you turn counterclockwise when you do that. And I'm just doing it to get it to the right consistency here, which it feels pretty good now. So it didn't need too much more flour. Okay, got a big chunk of butter in there. That one snuck in there, but that's okay. It's gonna make our crust yummy. So once you get your dough like this, then what we wanna do is cut this in half so that we can form it into 2 discs and wrap it in some saran wrap, and then we'll put it in the refrigerator to chill for about 30 minutes before we bring it out to make our pie crust to start putting and filling and baking the pie. So once you have your pie crust where you want it and it feels the right consistency, then we're just gonna try an eyeball to make it about even 2 discs that we're going to now flatten out. And you kind of want to make it into a ball so it's round and ready for your pie dish later, so it's not so difficult to roll out. So I'm just kind of making it into a circle and flattening it out a little bit so that when I go to roll it, it just makes it so much easier. While our pie dough is in the refrigerator resting for 30 minutes, Sophia and I are gonna get going on peeling all these apples and also slicing them and showing you how to slice them to go into the pie. I first want to talk about though the peeler. This is awesome too. This is the same maker actually that makes my pepper grinder, Coon Recon. You can get them at Sur La Table or probably any cooking store. But what I love about it, and it kind of takes getting used to if you've never used one of these peelers, but basically you want to take your product, whether it's a potato or apple, and you start at the top and go down away from your hand. It's super sharp and it works really quickly. And I really love them better than the peelers that you use your finger, the old school peelers, like when we were kids. It just kills your finger by the end. So these are this is what they use in the restaurants. They go really quickly, like when you have to make a bunch of mashed potatoes, this is the tool you want. So Sophie has peeled for me before, so I feel safe for her peeling the apples. So she's gonna start at the top and go down and around the apple. Something else that's a little trick of the trade, when I peel anything, potatoes or apples or anything that has a peel, I put a paper towel down in the sink just so that it makes it easy for cleanup later, because you definitely don't want those going down your garbage disposal. Okay, Sophie, go ahead and get started. I'm ready to show you guys how to dice the apple while Sophie's finishing up peeling all these apples. And I did want to talk about the apple because I think that's important when you're talking about apple pie specifically. I love to use the Granny Smith, the green apples. They tend to hold up better when you're baking a pie. They don't disintegrate, become mushy. They are a firmer textured apple. So if you do use a different apple other than Granny Smith, you want to make sure it's an apple that has a firmer texture. So definitely do your research on that because you don't want mushy apple pie. And now I'm going to show you, and you do want probably about, I would say if these are kind of small Granny Smith, sometimes there's the bigger Granny Smith apples. These are organic. So I would say if you're going to do smaller, you definitely want to get about 8 of these. If you're going to do the larger Granny Smith, you probably only need about 5 or 6 of those, okay, to fill up a nice size pie. So I'm going to show you now how to dice them. So what I do to kind of maximize as much of the apple as I can is without getting the core, so I just kind of go around the apple like that, take out that part, and then I know a lot of times people like to slice their apples really thick, but when I do my apple pie, I really like the smaller size and thin slices so that they cook all the way through. I don't like crunchy pieces of apple in my pie. I like it to be soft, but yet still have, a little texture to it. So the way my granny slices hers is she does them first in little slices, and they're pretty thin slices. I'll show you here as soon as I'm done with this one. Apples have a lot of starch, so they like to stick to your knife here. So you want it, probably about 1/4 of an inch maybe in cutting, and then I stand them up like little soldiers here, and I just do thin little 1/4 inch slices the other way. So I'm slicing to make apple slices, and then I'm going the other way to get little slices. And the reason I'm doing these little guys like that, I know it's probably interesting to everyone, is again, just because they're gonna cook all the way through in the time that the pie is in the oven, which is about 350 degrees for roughly about an hour. We don't want to overcook the pie crust, but yet we want to make sure all that yummy apple filling is cooked all the way through. So once you've done that, then you use the back of your knife, scoop up your apple or a bench scraper. I'll probably grab my bench scraper in a minute because we're going to be doing lots of apples. And then you just put them into a bowl to set aside. Now, apples, as they sit, will oxidize. That means as soon as they hit the oxygen in the air, they start to turn brown. They start to oxidize. So a lot of times you'll see in apple pie recipes to maybe squeeze some lemon juice over your apples if it's going to be a while before you're using the apples. We're going to use our apples pretty darn quickly. And to be honest, they're going into a pie, so we're not going to really see them that much. We're going to taste them, but we're not going to see them. So if I was using this in a salad and I didn't want them to turn like that brown color, then I would maybe squeeze a little acidulated water or some water with lemon juice in it, just so that they maintain that pretty white color that they have. We have finally got to the last apple here that I'm dicing. It can be, Sophie did a great job, by the way. Thank you, peeling all my apples. So if you can recruit help in the kitchen, especially for this, it does make it easier when you have help peeling all those apples, dicing all the apples. But say, it is a big task. I mean, it can be overwhelming. My granny actually, what she would do sometimes is she would dice all her apples one day and then put them in Ziploc freezer bags and put them in the freezer. And then she would do her pie dough a different day and wrap that and put that in the freezer. The pie dough would last about a month in the freezer. The apples you want to use within the month probably too. But you can always freeze what you've done and then do it the next day, or if you know that you're going to do it the next day, you could even just refrigerate it with the apples and the dough, because it'll last at least a day or two in the refrigerator. But if you're going to go longer than that, you might want to put it in the freezer and then use it within that month. But that's another option if it seems a lot to do in one day and you don't have an extra pair of hands to help you in the kitchen. You can absolutely do that. So I'm going to finish cutting up this last apple, and then we're going to get out our pie crust because it is ready to roll out and get this pie going into the oven. We are finally finished with all our apples, and I want you to really see how many apples are in here and how diced they are. It's quite a bit because as apples cook, they're going to shrink. So you want to make sure there's enough apple pie filling so it's not just all crust, even though I love crust. You want to make sure that it's about equal parts filling with the crust. So we have finished dicing. Now, Sophie, can you grab our pie dough out of the refrigerator? We're going to go ahead and get out the pie dough and get it rolled out so we can start filling up the pie. And then we're going to season these apples. You can season them in the bowl if you want, and then add them to your apple pie. My granny always seasons once they're in the apple pie. So I'm staying traditional to my granny's recipe. So we have 2 halves here. So we're going to take the first half. And you want to have just a little bench flour, we call it, which is flour to put on your bench, which in the culinary kitchen, the bench is the tabletop that you bake on, because usually it's made of wood and it kind of looks like a bench. So you want to sprinkle it on your countertop, and you want to make sure the dough does not stick in this process. And Sophie has my rolling pin. You can use, if you have a French rolling pin, that's fine. This is an American rolling pin where we roll back and forth, and since we're staying traditional today, we are going to be using that. So once you put your bench flour down, then you also want to sprinkle some flour on the top. Andy, can you see the dough well enough here? So you want to put some flour on top. You also want to take a pinch of flour and roll it, just put some on your rolling pin so it doesn't stick to the rolling pin when you start to roll it out. Now, when you roll out the pie dough, you really want to try and maintain that circular shape of the dough, because that's going to make it a lot easier when you want to roll it out and get it into your pan. So here is my pie plate, and I want to go a little bit bigger than what I think the diameter of my pie plate is. So I'm just going to work the dough from the middle to the edges. Hopefully you can see that, Andy. And all that yummy butter I see laminated in the dough from earlier, yum. Sophie, are you eating my apples over there? I've got a little helper today in the kitchen in case you're just joining us, and Miss Sophia, my daughter, she deserves those apples though, because she peeled all of them for me, which is my least favorite part of the pie making process for apple pie. So I have to, she can have some little bits of apple. All right, so I'm rolling this out. It looks pretty good. Let's see. Yep, it looks like it has a little bit of an overhang, so that's good. That's what you want. So I'm going to teach you guys a little trick here. This is my favorite part of doing pie crust, because you're like, okay, that's great. I got my pie crust rolled out. How in the heck am I going to get it onto that plate without breaking my pie crust? Well, this was a little trick we learned in the culinary kitchen. And this is why you want to make sure and dust too under your crust, because you don't want it to stick to the countertop, which mine kind of did a little bit. But you're going to roll your pie crust up onto your rolling pin. And I'm just going to put a little bit more flour on that so it doesn't stick. Then what you do is you unroll it onto your pie plate, and then you can adjust it a little bit. Here, I'm going to pull it up and over. So you want to try and make sure that it overhangs evenly, because we're going to still put the top crust on after we fill it. So you just kind of press it gently into your pan, into the edges of the pan. And now, Sophia, I'm going to need your help, okay? Would you please pour the apples? Like, you can take handfuls if you need to, but I need you to take all these apples and put them in for me, okay? Go ahead, go for it. Yum. And see, the apples are just starting to oxidize just a little bit, but that's okay. We're gonna bake them and they're gonna be brown and delicious anyway. We might have done too many apples. Let's do a little bit more. Keep going. Keep going. You can fill it up a little bit. Just want to evenly disperse them, because these are cut really small and they will shrink down, but I'd rather have more than not enough, because then you have all this crust and just a little bit of filling. So I am gonna kind of put this up quite a bit. Do a little bit more, honey. We might be able to use all of them. Let's just do it. Let me see, I'm gonna help you. I'm gonna put the rest in like this. Okay, and yum, yum, yum. And if you see escapees, go ahead and put them in, okay? Okay. All right, so here's all our delicious apples. Now we've got to make these apples happy, right? We want happy apples in our pie. So we're gonna start with the sugar. So let's go ahead and I'm just gonna dump out that flour because we don't need it anymore. We're gonna take a nice, generous, can you just put that evenly over the top of the apples? We wanna put lots of sugar. My granny always says you can never have enough butter or sugar. She is definitely from the South. If you guys know Paula Deen, I feel like my grandmother is Paula Deen from the Food Network, just reincarnated. She is like, got the blonde hair, she's got just that southernness to her, that if the mashed potatoes aren't yellow, there's not enough butter in them. So she uses a lot of butter. So Sophie put some sugar. I'm actually gonna add more, because the sugar, we wanna make sure it gets down in all those apples. So you can see I'm definitely a Southern girl here. So using a ton of sugar, because that's what's gonna create the maceration of the fruit, and it's gonna get the juices of the apple nice and sweet. Then we're gonna add some cinnamon, like Emerald would say. I love Emerald. Those are like the original cooking show people that I just love. And I'm just gonna sprinkle quite a generous amount of cinnamon over these apples, okay? Because this is gonna melt down in a minute when we put it in the oven, and it's gonna get all nice and juicy with that sugar and make like a caramel. It's so yummy. And then finally, what my granny would do is she would do just a little bit, like, so I'm just gonna because what's gonna happen is when you put the sugar on here and all the juices from the apple, you don't want your pie bubbling over. So the juices, there's so many apples in here that if you don't put a little bit of a thickening agent, which means flour or cornstarch, but flour is what my grandmother used. So she just sprinkled a little bit of flour over these, because you want some juice. You don't want it to suck up all the juice. You do want it to be a juicy piece of apple pie, but you don't want it like pouring over the pie in the oven. So she puts a little bit of flour. And then, of course, there's butter. So she adds just some little spots of butter with her paring knife throughout the pie here, which is gonna melt down and make that caramel that I'm talking about inside the pie, okay? So now, do these look like happy apples, Sophie? Mm-hmm. Yeah, right? Wouldn't you like to be one of these apples? Not baked, but sprinkled in all this sugar and butter. No? You like being Sophia more? Yeah, me too. I like you being Sophia more. Okay, so once I got my little dots of butter on here, this is definitely a homage to Miss Betty June King, my grandmother. Now we're gonna roll out the second pie crust that's gonna cover all this deliciousness, and I'm gonna show you how to make your pie crust to come together. I remember doing this with my granny when I was about your age, and it was always fun. I love doing it. So, and who doesn't like rolling it? So why don't you do it? You wanna do a little bit? You just start here and then go, start here and then go this way, okay? So move your stool over. Go ahead and do it. So just push down lightly and roll back and forth. There you go, push it more that way. Yep, you want it to be even all the way through, and then you can either turn the dough or turn your rolling pin. So you could do it like this, now do it that way, because you want to maintain a circle, okay? So you want to try and get it to be a nice circle that's big to cover the rest of those apples, yeah? Okay, keep going, you got it. Okay, go this way more. Make sure you just take it out all the way to the edge. Good job, and then go ahead and go back to doing it this way, like that. Good job. Good, good, good. So you want to see how it's turning into a big circle? So when you see it kind of getting like a rectangle, you want to just kind of move that part out so that you even it out into that big circle, okay? And you start in the middle and you just kind of work it to the sides. See that? Okay. So we're almost there. What do you think? A little bigger? Probably a little bit bigger, huh? Got a piece of apple in there from our pie that escaped. Okay, I want that. Butter I'll keep, but not the apple. Okie dokie. That looks pretty good. I think we're almost to the size, the diameter of our pie plate. And I want to go a little bit bigger if I can, because this is what's going to seal the pie together here. Okay. So that's pretty big, and that's what I want for this one, because this is going to connect the pie together. So just like we used to do the bottom crust, we used our rolling pin. I'm going to go ahead and use the rolling pin again to roll this up. I'm going to put a little bit more flour just so it doesn't stick. So gently kind of just drape it and roll it over your rolling pin, and then pick it up and kind of look. And then, oops, there it goes. This is the little trick here. Oof, look at that. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And look how much pie dough we have to work with. So that's great. And you can always trim your pie dough, like this side's really long. So I might trim this actually. But what I'm gonna do right now is just kind of show you guys how you're gonna pinch the crust together. So there's lots of different ways you can do this. My granny used a fork sometimes she made it fancy and used her thumb. So I'm gonna just kind of grab the crust. I don't know, Andy, if you can turn and see this. You wanna try and grab the crust from the bottom. See, there's the bottom crust. And you wanna push those crusts together as much as you can and crimp them all the way around the pan first, okay? So first we're just crimping and connecting the bottom crust with the top crust. Okay, that's the first step. All right, do you see all around the pie how it's all just pushed together, the bottom and the top? Now it's time to make it pretty. So you could use a fork and just kind of press the fork to seal it really securely, but I'm going to show you a little fancier way to do it. So I showed Sophie this when I made the pie the other day. You take your finger, your thumb, I would take your thickest finger, probably your thumb, and just kind of pull the dough, like use your pointer and your other thumb to kind of see how it's making the imprint of my finger, my thumb. And you just do this, kind of crimp it. It's like this is called a fluted crust, fluted. And you just pull your finger, and it does take some practice, and you do want to try and make it look even all the way around. So that's why it's important to have enough crust to work with, really. So we're almost done going around the side here. One more, maybe two. Okay. So we've got our fluted crust, and then, you know, this is where if you had extra pie dough, you could absolutely cut like a little apple with leaves out, or use a cookie cutter and make a beautiful decoration on top, which is gorgeous. Or in the fall when apples are in season, you could use a leaf cutter and put a leaf up here, which is gorgeous. But you know, whatever, you could also use the top one and cut slices. That's where they do it, and they lay them across and they do like a lattice crust top. So all of those are different options as well, but we're staying super traditional to my granny today and doing it the way she would do it. So I'm just gonna go ahead and now, when the pie is steaming, it does need a vent so that some of the air can come out. And Sophie, do you wanna do this part? Do you remember Mama doing it the other day? You just take the knife and kind of cut 4 like that. You wanna do it? No? Okay. So I just cut 4 little vents, really pretty in the top, okay? And now what we're gonna do is sprinkle some more to finish the pie before it goes into the oven. Oh my gosh, Sophie, I forgot to heat the oven. Will you hit it to 350 degrees, bake, and then hit the oven light on for me? Thank you. Okay, so we're gonna finish this off with some more sugar on top. So I'm gonna put some sugar up on top of this pie. Yum. Just a little bit. It's more for decoration, and just it's for flavor too, but the decoration. And then we're gonna sprinkle some more cinnamon on top of this pie crust. Yum, 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 yum. Cinnamon, cinnamon. Look how beautiful that is. Doesn't it smell good? Yeah. And then my granny, of course, always finishes it off with a little more pads of butter on top, because you can never have enough, right? My granny, when we go to a restaurant, she actually, she orders butter and then bread. So her bread looks like it's just the vehicle really for the butter. It really is. Our pie now is ready to go into the oven. Sophie just heated it up. So as soon as our oven preheats to 350 degrees, we're gonna put this in there. I like to put my actual pie plate and pie on a sheet tray. So I'm gonna have Sophie ask you to get out a baking sheet for me, a big one, big cookie sheet. So we can put the pie on there. It'll make it easier for you to get out later. It's so hard to get it out with the oven mitts when it's like this, so it'll make it easier for you to get out as well. You want this pie to cook for about 45 to an hour to really make sure it's golden brown and delicious. We want the crust to look beautiful and GBD. And then we also want to make sure that all the little apples inside are cooked. So when I cooked this pie a couple weeks ago, it took about 45 minutes to an hour. I just kept checking on it, but about an hour is when it was ready. It'll just vary on your temperature of your oven and how strong it is and how hot it gets. But 350 for 45 minutes to an hour, and then you take it out and let it just cool, and then slice and enjoy. So we're gonna get this in the oven, and as soon as it's done cooking, we'll be back. I wish you guys had smell-o-vision, because this smells phenomenal. The whole house smells like apple pie, cinnamon and apples. Our pie's been in here, our apple pie, for an hour in my 350 degree oven. So it's time to look and see if it's ready. I think by smell, it really is. Oh my gosh, that looks beautiful. Oh my gosh, you guys see that? Golden brown and delicious, GBD, it is hot. So I'm gonna set it up here and close up our oven here and turn that off. It's a hot day today, so we don't need extra heat in the kitchen, right? And if you want to come closer, check out this pie crust, how delicious it is. That's the cinnamon on top and sugar that got caramelized. You can see my pie did bubble up over just a little bit, so it's a good idea to put it on a cookie sheet with some parchment paper just in case some of the juices do escape and come out. But this is the color for sure that you want. Sophie, do you want to come in and see it? What do you think? Looks pretty good, huh? I can't wait to have a piece. Will you share a piece with me? And of course, we can't have our apple pie unless there's a la mode. So we do have some vanilla ice cream, and I'm sure everyone's going to be excited to dig into this in a little bit. Now that the pie is cooled down, we get to do the fun part, which is eat it. So I'm going to cut Sophie and I, my little partner today, a piece for all our hard work that we did, right, Soph? And let's see what we got. Oh, this crust is so yummy and flaky. Okay, the first piece of pie, just so you know, just like the first cake piece, usually doesn't come out very pretty, but it tastes amazing. So let's see how I do. Let's see if I can get this little guy out of here. Ooh, look at all those apples and look at that crust. I'm gonna put some more apples. I always have to scoop out the rest. See how juicy it is? There's still nice juice in there. I know some went over on our little sheet tray, but look at those apples cooked all the way through. Yum. And of course, Sophie, we want some ice cream on there, right? You want some ice cream? Okay, let's do that. So I'm gonna get a scoop of ice cream. Because to me, nothing says apple pie like an extra scoop of ice cream on there. Yum. All right, you ready to try it? I have a fork for you. Let's dig in. Go ahead. Let's see what you think. Go for it. Get some ice cream on there. I want to try that crust. What about you? Oh, crust is my favorite. Let's see. Mmm. So good. Those apples are cooked all the way through. Mmm. Oh, it is really good, guys. Thank you so much for joining us this week for Quarantine Cooking. We hope you and your family are staying safe, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week. Take care.